If you've ever visited Yellowstone or Yosemite, or even our own local Crater Lake, then you'll know the elemental beauty that national parks possess. Or maybe you've just seen photos and have come to the same conclusion. Either way, you've developed your own appreciation for nature. We Oregonians love our lush Pacific Northwest. But today, we'll travel to take a look at the forests of Romania, where national parks and forests are being illegally logged for their valuable timber. We'll follow this issue from its roots, through its branches, and into the canopy of the elite who profit off of creating a landscape of devastation. A third of Romania is covered in forest. That's 7 million hectares. 500 of those are considered to be primeval forests. These are also known as primary forests, not only because they're made up of ancient and protected tree species, but because they're home to many animals, such as bears, wolves, foxes, deer, and lynx, that are about as hard to find in Europe as the Fahrenheit system. In fact, Romania is home to over a third of all of Europe's carnivorous mammals, including Dracula. So, what makes Romania's forests different? Well, as one might assume, their advantage lies in the amount of forest, but it's specifically the amount of primeval forest. This is because, by definition, primeval forest is undisturbed by humanity, allowing it to develop unique ecological characteristics. Many of these areas can be classified as climax communities, the highest level of development an ecosystem can reach. Romania has more primeval forest than any other EU country outside Scandinavia. And we can assume that if people had been able to stand the cold weather there long enough to use up all of those resources, they would be gone too. It is Europe, after all, a continent where dense populations, urban sprawl, and industrialization have steadily decimated the natural environment for the past century. In the governmental shift after communism, Romania divided all of its forested land into state and private ownership. More than half was privatized. In addition, many politicians and forestry officials received their own large pieces of land. Kind of like how our employees sometimes get a bonus, except not at all. On October 9th, 2020, a special report was published by the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, following the work of activists and scientists trying to protect Romania's forests. They began by surveying Bear Valley in the Apucen Mountains, where wildlife populations have dwindled down to practically nothing after the single largest clear-cutting event in a decade took place, completely removing an estimated 4,000 trees. The loggers did leave some trees, specifically along the main road, creating a cover for the 500 hectares behind it that were cut down. When the trees disappear, the animals disappear. Bear Valley hasn't seen a single bear since the illegal logging took place. Cases like this happen throughout Romania in both state and private forests. When the survey team travels, they also bring Pedro with them, a deer they rescued as a baby. I suppose for some reason they thought that was safer than rescuing a bear cub, but in any case, no after-the-fact aid is an effective replacement for what a natural ecosystem provides for deer, bears, and other species, according to the World Economic Forum. These forests are a contiguous system specifically designed by the Romanian government decades ago to be ecologically and biologically stable by working together. As primeval forests, these places have been able to develop a strong biodiversity where plants and animals are interdependent and thrive off of one another. There are not many places like this left in Europe, and they take time to develop that animal populations simply cannot afford. Crucially, these areas simply can't be replaced by new forests and save the animals there because these old trees are of an age and quality that the young ones simply aren't. The young forests would not be of the quality needed for wood products, and the oldest forests would still be a target for logging instead of the new forests. A century ago, Americans recognized the strength and history that the California redwoods provided for the country, and they took efforts to create the Sequoia National Forest. It's now seen as one of the earliest successes of American environmentalists. The primeval forests of Romania play the same role for all of Europe. Environmentalists blame private interests and a corrupt system of politicians, prosecutors, police officers, and forestry officials for this broken system and damage that we're seeing today. A report by Radio Liberty, a U.S. government media organization, highlighted that the $6.6 billion industry in Romania is dominated by an Austrian company, Holz Industrie Schweighofer, or HS Timber, known to many environmentalists and civic groups alike for being one of the largest buyers of illegal timber. A Romanian conservationist, Gabriel Pan, who's also the founder of a conservation group, Agent Green, decided to travel to one of the HS sawmills in Sebeș. He got the license plate of an entering lorry and entered it into a system that eventually told him it had been illegally logging in an area known as Bucova. Bucova is a protected area, protected by the system Natura 2000, created by the EU, making a network of conservation areas protecting habitats and wildlife in Europe. These areas need special permission to be able to access resources in them, and in this specific case, Bucova doesn't allow any sort of logging at all because it's such an important area for mammals traveling from the northern Carpathian Mountains to the southern mountains. It's the only path for them. So the company wouldn't have been able to get a request granted, even if they filed one in the first place. In addition, there's many loopholes in the system that make it hard to report illegal logging. As a former local timber dealer who now spends his days tracking illegal lorries going by his house found out. When he tried to identify illegal logging, he found out that the system now gives people the right papers even when the logging they're doing is illegal. In addition, they're allowed to declare less wood than is actually being logged. They can use the same papers for multiple lorries, and sometimes people have been able to report logs as wood products instead of actual wood that would need transport papers. This corrupt system fights against these conservationists every day, and they often face heavy setbacks, intimidation, and ostracism. Gabriel Pan and other conservationists are ostracized by their communities who often have their livelihoods paid for by the timber industry. Yet, despite this appearance, the timber industry is actually bad for the Romanian economy. The Romanian previous timber companies, before these foreign companies were able to enter, provided many jobs. A single company was able to provide 3,000 jobs for their town. Gabriel Pan estimates that they used half as much timber and yet created twice as many jobs as foreign industries do now. 5 foreign companies, mostly from Austria and Turkey, now dominate all of Romania's timber, yet they sell mostly to international markets and not Romanian markets. In addition, Tiberi Bosutar, another activist, has found that he's gotten fined for misleading authorities and alarming the police for no reason when he's tried to report illegal logging. Sometimes there can also be retaliation in a physical form. When Bosutar and several of his co-workers traveled to investigate a private mill owned by a forestry official and his son, who ran the wood processing center, they were attacked. The farmer and his son decided to block their path, follow them, and attack them with axes, breaking several windows and attempting to crash their car into Bosutar's car before he was ultimately able to escape. These people are not typically what we imagined mafia criminals and this is not what we imagine mafia criminals and corrupt politicians to typically be like. We don't see them as obsessed with trees, but this is the case in Romania, and it's had disastrous consequences. A forestry worker who spent 70 years trying to protect the forests said he didn't believe there would ever be any justice for the trees, let alone the people. This sentiment is echoed throughout Eastern Europe, where decades and decades of greed and corruption have destroyed the people's belief that a government can ever work for their interests. Yet, conservationists have still had many successes in recent years. In the past few months, they've been able to successfully lodge complaints with the EU against the Romanian government, and now several infringement procedures are underway. The European Court of Justice will judge these cases soon. In addition, anti-mafia and anti-corruption authorities are investigating disclosures made by activists into money laundering, black money, tax evasion, and bribery, including organized crime. This is an important reminder for Romanians and the rest of the world that there is power in activism if one assumes the responsibility for active advocacy.